we have a whole system that preys on the individual for economic means. So substance use or not, if you don't have the money, you're going to be on the shit end of the stick. And some people find themselves struggling to break that cycle.
Hi, folks. It's Alex with the Community Project. I'm here with Victor King, the Recovery Coach Manager with the SOR grant. So, Vic, what's the SOR grant?
The SOR grant is a state opioid and stimulant response grant. It's a $44 million grant that addresses stimulant use and opioid use in Colorado.
Okay, so that's all of Colorado.
Yep, every state gets their cut of money from the federal government, so they're called the state opioid response grants. And so the $44 million is Colorado's slice of that. And I'm part of the Recovery Coach Managers, the peer support team under that grant. I supervise a statewide team of about 14 to 16 peers who work at about like 9 different agencies. So I'm the mentor and, one of their supervisors. And then the other part of my role is I'm a trainer. So I teach all the courses needed for someone to be a state certified peer. And under the grant, I'm able to teach those classes at no cost.
What is peer support?
Peer support has simply been there, done that, but that's not what we do. So peer support professional is what we do.
Okay.
You can be a peer in anything, but that's not what is needed. And so a peer support professional is lived experience plus. So you have the lived experience, and then you add in the training, the supervision, the oversight, the work experience, and that allows you to get a state certification. And you're basically a mental health professional at that point. You can bill for services, you can work with people in a variety of settings, but it's not just lived experience, but it's a lived experience plus. And that's what separates peer support from a peer support professional.
Okay. So lived experience is peer support. Anyone with lived experience in any sort of
being on this earth, we all have that lived experience.
We can help people be human in that scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. But when we're talking about peer support, these are people that have been on the street for a certain amount of time. Does that matter?
So a peer support professional is someone who has an experience with mental illness and they're in a state of recovery, substance use issue and they're in a state of recovery, or neither one of those, but they live with a family member or they support a family member with a mental health issue or a substance use issue that also qualifies them as peer support. For example, you could say, I've never had a drop to drink in my life, but I live with my father who is an alcoholic, and you're qualified under that sort of lived experience. So it's 3 different categories.
What do you guys cover in your trainings?
So there's 60 hours of training, and it's basically like what you need for like an associate's degree at a community college. So you cover the basics of what peer support is. For example, it's not sponsorship. It's not case management. It's something in between where you walk beside people, but also you're knowledgeable of the resources. You take an ethics training. And then suicide prevention is usually part of that. Motivational interviewing. A lot of trauma-informed trainings can fall under that umbrella. But usually these courses cost anywhere to $300 to $500. And so it creates a financial obstacle for anyone trying to enter that field. And so that's why my grant does these classes at no cost.
That's wonderful. Does the individual taking this class need to be housed before they're able to become a peer support professional?
They need to be stable. So I've had classes where a person was unhoused and they took the class, but even if they're unhoused, they need a structure, people helping them. Everyone wants to do it, but they're not ready. So someone really has to be ready in a number of different ways, having the equipment to take the class. You can't sit in the park and take the class. You need a place where you can concentrate.
Is it class online then?
They're online or they're in person. So there's a couple of different classes, but usually they find out about this by someone refers them to the class and then they take it from there.
Gotcha. You have some experience in this area yourself, and this is how you got into this field. Is that accurate?
Yep.
You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So I guess I first applied for the job literally when I was in the Boulder County Jail, wrote on the, jail letterhead, sent it off to the place where I work, and they said, when you get out of jail, reach us again. Um, Prior to that, I was homeless for 6 years and hopelessly addicted to meth. And the intervention for me was a pair of handcuffs. Luckily, in the Boulder County Jail, there's multiple programs that people can take advantage of. And so basically, over the course of time, I started my recovery, was able to get my son back out of foster care. And, I've been working in this position for 10 years, 5 years with the grant. But I've lived in Boulder 30 years. And so part of that was, 6 years, basically straight. I was homeless, in Boulder.
Wow. That must have been a challenging 6 years.
There's valleys and peaks in that experience. It all wasn't bad. There's definitely some fond memories. Not having any attachments to any responsibilities is intoxicating. You don't have to do anything. And if you look up Boulder, it's a great place to do nothing. If you have all your needs met, it can be the Niwat's curse, right? You're destined to come back here. So part of it was just having fun, having a good old time. The other part was tragedy and suffering. And so it's a balance of that. And some folks stay in the tragedy and suffering, and some folks find some pleasure in the freedom associated with that. And there are many people that I've lost along the way. So at a certain point, when it becomes unfun, you really have to make a decision. Do I miss my old life, or do I feel that I'm destined just to die out here in the streets? So being able to find some hope in that process is a necessary ingredient for folks, to move on. And there's several like me who've also found this hope and found work. So I'm not the only success story. There are others from my group who are now working and married and doing great things. And there are other folks. I was at the church the other day doing a service, some AccuDetox, and I recognize at least 5 people that have been on these streets over 10 years. So just being able to acknowledge both of that is, in some ways, it's really tragic that they've been out there for so long and they haven't been able to find, what recovery looks like for them.
These are people that are still addicted to substances?
No, it's not just substance use that makes people homeless. We have a whole system that preys on the individual for economic means. So substance use or not, if you don't have the money, you're going to be on the shit end of the stick. And some people find themselves struggling to break that cycle.
Do we have enough supports for people to be able to dig themselves out of that?
I think there's plenty of supports. The issue is the line extends from here to the Kansas border. So for every person that we get out of this situation, 2 people fall in behind them. So you're pulling one person out the river and you're like, well, the river is empty. You're like, nope, there's actually 3 more people in the river. And you're like, oh, shucks, what do I do? So there are successes, but there's limited resources and we can't help everyone. So at least in this county, for every person that we help, someone fills the spot they leave behind them.
And is that because more people are coming here because it's such a nice place? Well, I guess Niwat's curse, people don't leave, so we just keep getting more people showing up. And people
I think that's really due to our capitalistic society. You won't get healthcare if you don't have money. Rents across the country are rising. The affordable housing stock has decreased. So there's a lot of systematic things that are taking place that aren't just substance use. And if people are coming here, they're also leaving as well. So Boulder's not immune to, this is happening all over Colorado. Pueblo, Denver, Fort Collins, the Western Plains. So it's not unique to Boulder, and Boulder's not a magnet. People are just stuck in these situations and they're just going wherever they can be less traumatizing. And so Boulder is less traumatizing in some degree to having this experience in Pueblo or Colorado Springs or in Denver. And if you've been to those cities and you come to this city, you're like, well, I'll just stay here for a while. I'm not going to get hit in the head, or you may get hit in the head, but it's slightly better than some of the other experiences. But again, with the limited resources, ultimately people have to make their own decisions about what they want to do and what's acceptable for them. And so if they're not sick and tired of the situation, or they don't have the capacity to change things, or they're physically unable to do things or mentally unable to do things, there's no one necessarily here to save them unless they're at the extreme ends of those things. Or you can't walk, we'll get you into this place. You're hallucinating every single day, we'll get you into treatment. But if you fall somewhere in between, you're just going to be left to fend for yourself.
It's a dangerous scenario on the streets, correct? I mean, it's
life or death, definitely. Yeah. So there's a community when you're on the streets, and so you can choose to be part of this community, or you can choose to isolate, just like you do in real life. You can talk to your neighbor, or you can say, I'm never going to talk to that person. I'm just going to go home and drive my car in the garage and don't even have to go outside to check the mail. Or you can say, I'm going to talk to my community. I'm going to invite them over for food. We're going to get together. And so on the unhoused community, there is safety in numbers, but there's also, you could choose the wrong person, or it's hard to trust people, especially if you've been victimized before. But there is, like I said, there were some fond times when I was unhoused because we had a community and there was a group of us that suffered together. And so in that, we were able to sort of protect each other, but just like almost with like siblings, we would also fight amongst each other. And, so in some essences, you're not calling the police when someone steals your stuff. You're just going to do street justice, and right. I'm going to go over there and handle this myself. But there is, for lack of a better word, a tribal community in the unhoused community where it's your chosen family, and you see the people around you in the same situation as family, or maybe your family has even left you, or you've burnt all these bridges. And so that's my brother right there. We've been sleeping together under this bridge for the last 6 months, and I would die for him. And so they have to form these new connections. And so that's just a natural thing for humans to do.
Seems like that might be a pretty strong bond too, if you're living in this pretty much constant crisis scenario, in a fight or flight.
It can be. And so when someone dies, it's a tragedy that really rocks you to your core. When you see your brother, like you wake up one morning and he doesn't wake up, and then you've just lost a family member, and you've seen other family members get mistreated by the police, or you see your family members suffering without socks or shoes. You may want to, help them out just like you would another family member, but also you can't lose sight of who you were. Most of us weren't born in the streets. And so being able to reconnect to that without any form of trauma healing is really problematic. So you talked about substance use, but that's not the issue. The issue is the trauma that led them to the substance use. And that's not addressed. 30, 60, 90 days of sobriety is going to be pointless when I'm having nightmares every single night, or I have all these untreated things that my sobriety does not address. So it's a great pathway to start addressing those things, but trauma is what brought these folks to these situations. In some cases, it happens naturally, but the root of a lot of these things, mental illness, substance use, is really based on trauma. And that's something that everyone experiences in different ways. Yet, if you don't have the coping skills to deal with that, you will continue to suffer.
So to clarify, you're saying people don't end up on the streets because of substance abuse. They end up using substances because they're on the streets. I
would say if you talk to someone on the streets and you say, what happened to you? Go back to when they were 10, when they were 5, or even in the womb. Maybe they had a traumatic birth and they were on an incubator, things like that. So there are some traumas that we can remember, like, oh yeah, I remember my dad hitting me. But there's also traumas that happen earlier on before even the memory starts. So if you point to it in that sort of realm, the diagnosis isn't you're schizophrenic, or borderline personality. The diagnosis is, well, these things happened to you when you were 6 years old, and you were in an unsafe environment, and ever since it's been worse ever since then. So the earlier you can intervene, the easier it is to get help. If you break your leg and you go to the doctor today, it's easier to get help. But imagine if you break your leg when you're 6 and you live 20 years with a broken leg. Sure, they can treat it, but they're going to have to re-break the bone, do all these other things. It'd be so painful and so hard to do. And so just taking that analogy with mental illness or substance use, it started here, but then it blossomed and it grew to all these other things that are now so much harder to treat.
How would you take someone off the street? Let's say someone that's had trauma, has substance abuse issues. What course of action do we have here to help them?
There are many options, and sometimes the criminal justice system provides the most resources. So if you get off the street in a pair of handcuffs, then you're taken to jail. Then there's programs in jail, and then there's probation or parole. And they're saying, okay, now we're going to put you in this program, a drug court program or a family program, because you have these 16 crimes. And so that's one avenue. There's just a natural recovery. I talked to a person who said, a bolt of lightning hit the ground 30 yards in front of me, and I decided my life needs to change. So it can just happen naturally, right? There's also different systems people can choose to enter, whether it's some sort of treatment, some sort of housing, a short-term program that will get them back into the apartment that they just left, or maybe a longer-term program like Fort Lyons or some of these places where you can stay 6 months to a year. I can't get someone off the streets. They really have to make a choice. And so we can fill out the application and do the paperwork, and you don't show up on that day, I'm going to go hunt you down and pull you into this program that you're not motivated for. So at some point, we just need to acknowledge people are making choices. And so some people like being in the river. Say, this is great. The water's fine. Leave me alone. It's my life. And some people, again, they're sick and tired. It's like, you know what? I can't survive another winter in the streets. I'm too old. And so, unfortunately, another thing that I've seen is we rescue people and they die in their housing in the first 1 or 2 years because it's all caught up to them because they spent 10 or 15 years out there. Now you're 55, you're 67. Now you're getting housed, and you haven't taken care of yourself for the last 20 years. And you're not able to live a quality of life. The life expectancy of someone who is unhoused is 55 years versus 70 for the rest of us. And so if I'm catching you at 55, you haven't been to the doctor in 10 years, this isn't treated, that's untreated. So it just makes it that much harder to help someone versus the prevention. Hey, let's get you when you're 21, when you're 18, when you're 25. Let's get you before you go to prison, versus having to go to prison to get these programs and support.
So kind of an early intervention type of scenario?
The early intervention would be nice. And if appropriate, or if the resource is there, that can happen. But often what happens is we're just stuck in survival mode. We don't want people dying in front of us. So let's give them food. Let's give them clothes. Let's get them shelter, the basic needs. And a lot of resources go towards basic needs versus a lot of resources going towards prevention or recovery or housing or substance use treatment.
Could you see a path out of this problem? Can you see a solution?
Sure. If our society, which is capitalistic, there's no value in the substance use or helping people. And we've also seen like California spend like $25 billion. And so there's some things that have tried that have failed. And some people say, well, maybe we need $50 million versus the $25 billion. But for me, the path out is the individual, just one person at a time, being able to see their success, highlight them as a role model to other people, and then go to the next person. But also, sometimes the resources pull away once we pull you out of the river. Okay, we got you out the river. You're good. We got to worry about these 5 other people to make sure they don't drown. But like, well, I need help. I'm in a house. I don't feel comfortable. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to socialize. I don't have any income streams. So let me just go back to these same survival mechanisms. I'll go to the feed. I'll get my clothing from the church. I'll still socialize with people who are still unhoused versus, some life skills to almost, give a rebirth to the person and say, okay, let's reintroduce you to yourself almost. And
are there any conditions that come along with housing?
No, unless you enter in a certain program, like we have the Bridge House Ready to Work program where there's a sobriety requirement. You have to also go to their classes. You have to meet with a case manager. You have to put some of your money into a bank account. You also have to work 20 hours a week. But that's just one program. We need 15 programs like that for different people at different skill levels. And so with some of this housing, the only requirement is just that you're there, you know.
Do you think that's an efficient system?
I mean, it's voluntary. So people are making choices. Even if you're in permanent supportive housing, you have a choice to either interact with your case managers and ask for help, or just say, I got this on my own and I don't need your help at all. For some people that works because they can reconnect to who they were before. Now I'm indoors. Now I can paint and do all the things I loved. Or I've been out in the woods for too long and I have no idea what to do now that I'm indoors. And I don't trust these people. And I don't have a set of coping skills to deal with my boredom or these other things that I seem to be lacking. And some of these programs, at least in Boulder, they're brand new, right? They've only been around for a couple years. And sometimes the model is, well, we'll just call the police. We'll just keep calling the police versus, necessarily not your typical intervention, but at a certain point, giving people options to save them from themselves is what is needed.
Yeah. During this administration now that we're starting to see some budget cutting, how do you think that's going to impact Boulder County, and how has it already? If you already know.
Well, I guess one thing is the housing lottery or the housing wait list has been sort of put on pause. So if there's not a lot of exits for people, then that is a problem. Staffing cuts are also a problem as well. If people don't have enough workers to just give people the time that they need versus, seeing people in an assembly line. But I think, again, if there are other parts of our society that value this, then the budget cuts wouldn't matter, right? If we spend, I don't know, if Coach Deion Sanders is paid $5 million a year and brings $90 million of economic stuff to Boulder, like, well, where is that going? Is it just for profit? The budget cuts don't address the vacant housings that they have here in Boulder where, you have these large houses and no one lives in them, or, one person lives in a 6-bedroom house. So it's easy to point fingers, and, I try to stay solution based, and despite the budget cuts, there's still well-intended people who are doing the good work out there and will continue to do that work, regardless of if there's a source of federal funding. So they say there's a will, there's a way. So if someone can survive on the streets for 10 years without any funding, like, they figured it out. And so some places have been able to be agile enough to find different ways versus saying, oh, the government's not helping us, so we're shutting down our doors.
What do you think the general perception of homelessness is in Boulder? Is it problematic insofar as people just don't want to see the problem, or is it problematic insofar as people want to solve the problem?
Well, if you go to some of the more popular websites like Nextdoor or Reddit, you would think that people hate other people who are suffering. I went to the park and I saw this, or I saw this on the creek path when I was biking. So sometimes maybe they are to blame for some situations because people are inconvenienced by someone sleeping at a place where they want to, sort of hang out or enjoy the same facilities that they do. But also there's this thing where just people are tired. How many times do you have to, for example, bike theft? Ask people in Boulder how they feel about bike theft, and there'll be a totally different response. And then ask someone how they feel about homelessness. So sometimes those things are linked. They think, well, they're just stealing bikes, they're pooping in the creek, they're vandalizing all these things. And so they're making our life harder. For example, the library was closed due to meth contamination. And so they can point some fingers and with some truth at these are consequences of our welcoming environment. And there are some folks who say they care, but they really don't, So there's that sort of, I don't want to use the term, well, I want to say it, but the neoliberalism of, for example, they all had Black Lives Matter signs on their front lawns when this stuff happened in the summer of George Floyd. But how many people of color do they really know? How many people of color are they interacting with? Or they're just saying, "Oh, I'll just put the flag out because it looks cool." But in the day to day, they're going back to, the isolation or just whatever they're doing. So it's performative in some ways. I'll go to the park, I'll hand out some socks, but I come home and see someone digging through my trash, I'm calling the police. And so it's easy to label folks and say it's us versus them. And I think that happens everywhere, and Boulder's not immune to that. And Boulder has its own set of problems that, it needs to acknowledge in different ways. Because the city's doing one thing, but the police department is doing something else. So for the unhoused individual, they were left outside during COVID and no one gave two shits about them. But everyone else was, cared for and, and all these things. So in some ways, it doesn't matter to the unhoused individual because, they're feeling lost. They're feeling like no one's cared about me for a long time. And that's going to continue. And so it's like, just F the world. I'll do whatever I want. We have I don't need you anyway. So it's definitely a mixed bag, and it's inconsistent as well.
So if someone wanted to approach someone, is there any concerns that people should have if they go out to the park and they see someone? I mean, there's
definitely concerns. And so if people want to help, they should engage with the people who are already doing this just to see what it's like. So before you go out to the park, spend some time volunteering at the church or the homeless shelter or making sack lunches with one of the many organizations. And then after that, you decide, hey, I'm going to go do this on my own. But to go out on a solo mission, you don't want to be John Rambo out there. Yeah. You want to be able to coordinate with other people. What have they seen? Where should I go? And just have some experience on what I should do or what I shouldn't do.
Is there any organization in particular that you would direct people to get trained to be able to go out and volunteer and be that?
No, that really doesn't exist. So some places do have, if you go to the shelter, they'll teach you some things and they'll have you work in the kitchen. Or if you go to the church to serve food, they'll have you sign up and saying, hey, you got to wear a mask and gloves and wash your hands. Some places will allow hey, we need 50 sandwiches a day. Can you make these at your home and bring these down to people and pass things out? There's Safe Boulder, which passes out tents and things like that. So there's a lot of places that are operating basically independent of each other. And so you can reach out to one of these independent agencies, but there's nothing really linking or connecting them together as come here, we can show you 5 different places where you can work in the community.
So we don't have something structured enough to be able to route people to a place where their skills could be properly used. Or
the hope was the Homeless Day Center would be that place. It'd be a central hub. There'd be multiple providers and opportunities for people to engage with people, engage with providers, get education on what needs folks have, or I own a business, how can I help? Or I'm an artist, how can I help? So most people are internally motivated, just, hey, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to go out there and pick up trash, or I'm going to go out there and talk to some person. But there's not a system that's in place that would just connect the average citizen to, hey, these are the 10 places that you can help in this town if you choose to do so.
I think the county website has a list of providers that they work with. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can direct people to there and they can check out individual organizations if they wanted to volunteer with a specific need.
There are a lot of places that are listed on the county website. And so I would just say, what is your passion? Is it veterans? Then look for, on homeless veteran services. Is it runaway youth? Then, okay, what's going on with the youth? Where can I help someone who's under the age of 21 or under the age of 18? Is it families who need help, who are couch surfing or doubling up? How can I help families in need? Is it going to EFA and volunteering, or is it going to the community food share or Harvest of Hope to, help out on that capacity? Or you could say this sandwich isn't enough. I need to get more involved. I want to do more. And just being, so curiosity is really the best way to approach this. just like with the unhoused individual, you have to have some motivation. You have to do some of that work yourself. I just can't give you the list and say, here you go, Bob, go out and feel good about yourself. Like, you have to be like curious, like, well, what's going on? How can I get informed? How can I get connected to what's going on in the city? Not just simply going to a website and choosing off a menu of choices, but maybe things have changed. Maybe there's a new organization. Maybe your neighbors are doing something that you have no idea about. So approaching it with curiosity and a lack of judgment, I think, would get more people involved if they really choose to do so.
How many folks on the street do you think have some sort of mental health condition happening?
At least 60%.
You think 60?
And, it's often, they call it the trimorbidity. So you have a mental health issue, you have a physical health issue, and you may have a substance use issue. And so if you have all three of these issues, which one are you going to treat first? And if you treat one, well, what about the other one? Back to the example level, we address your sobriety, but you still have physical health issues and you still have mental health issues as well. So I think we're all in recovery from something, whether you're unhoused or not, you're going to have a mental health issue. And again, in our society, do we treat that, or do we just say, hey, give me the medication and I'm good? Is this a subject that we're all comfortable talking about? Or is this something that we just whisper about and it's highly stigmatized? So I'm not going to bring up that I'm suffering from depression or that I'm thinking about, harming myself or suicide. And so normalizing the conversation about mental health would help just to reduce the stigma and reduce the stigma just about asking for help in general and being vulnerable.
It seems like if you had severe enough mental health issues, it would be hard to get meds. And if you're on the street, it'd be hard to get meds for your condition.
I mean, if you have entered in treatment before and you realize this is what helps me and I need to go to my doctor, I need to talk to my case manager, there's people who do that, who choose to get the help for themselves. And there's some people who, I'm not going to take my medication. Almost like going to the dentist. Some people say, I'm not going to brush my teeth, and they suffer the consequences, for the oral health. Or some people say, this actually hurts. Let me go in there and talk to make an appointment. So even with that mix, it's not going to improve your financial situation if you're on your meds and you're doing the right thing and then nothing seems to work out for you. So it can be, if they don't have hope in this situation, why should I get my meds? Everyone's shit on me. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to get housing. It's never worked before. And so I'm just going to give up and just, and give up hope. And so being able to have some hope that, hey, this can lead to other things. This is just a start of things. Is sometimes what happens when they go to a provider and they start to get services. For example, you go to clinical family health and you could say, I'm going to see my case manager, and then I'm going to go see the person in dental aid. And then maybe I'll make an appointment with my primary care because they said my blood pressure is way too high. I need to go get this checked out. So hopefully it should link to another dimension of wellness. But, there are multiple dimensions of wellness that need to be addressed to get someone hope.
To me, it seems like a lot of folks with mental health concerns they're already, like, even if they're housed, they have a heck of a time working within the systems that already exist. Like they have to go to the doctor, they have to get diagnosed, they have to get, they have to have a treatment plan. I mean, maybe the med's wrong. They got to try different cocktails to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of time and energy. It's hard to get transportation to your doctor if you don't have any money. I mean, is there any places that help folks, like set up appointments and get them there? And who's doing that?
I mean, there are places that help. I think the issue here is it just can't be one place. You just can't say, oh, I have a case manager at the All Roads Shelter and they're taking care of everything. That's a lot of eggs to put in one basket. That's actually, to your point, that's too many eggs. So you need multiple pillars of support. You need a doctor, a dentist, a therapist, a case manager, a peer support person, a family member, a friend, a nutritionist, someone to talk to you about when there's no one else to talk to. And so if you just say, oh, I just have one case manager, they're not going to be able to address all these other issues because they're already overworked to begin with. So for the people who do find success, again, they say, I don't have one appointment today. I have 3, right? It's not just housing. They're going to work on my teeth. They're going to talk to my medication. They're going to follow my SSI paperwork. We're going to go to the county office and work on these other things. So it's really the wraparound services that someone needs to be able to elevate them to the next level. Because if you simply just have a housing voucher and you get housed, that's not enough. You haven't learned how to engage in these other systems. You don't trust these other systems, and it's going to be much harder to reach you when I knock on your door and you're not answering it. But if you've been there and say, oh yeah, you haven't been to this place in 6 months, should you go back to services? Yeah, that was actually helpful before. Let me try to reconnect with that. Or I have a lot of free time. Let me see if I can go to this doctor's office. So
is that team existing right now?
It just depends on where you're at. So if you are a runaway youth, they have a great program for wraparound services, and they'll get a whole team around you. If you're some 30-year-old male just sitting in the park drinking a beer, they're not going to wrap around services around you. They're going to say, you seem able to do some of these things on your own, so we expect you to do some of that. Or if you're super vulnerable, like you have cancer, you're going to die in 3 months, let's make sure you don't die on the streets. Let's get you the help that you need. You need this surgery, you need this medication. Now your doctor's involved, your case manager's involved, your family's involved, because they realize how dire it is. So sometimes if you're not in trouble, you're not going to get these sort of wraparound services. And
is that because of funding?
That's just the way the system operates. The system is designed to help those who are most vulnerable. And those are the ones they worry about first. And so if you're not the most vulnerable, you're just going to have to wait in line, and it's going to be a longer line for some of these services. And you might wait 2, 3, 4 years, to get a housing voucher or to find your place. Or you're going to prison. Now let's get you into some services. Or again, you're going to die in 5 years due to all these other things. Or you've been hospitalized 5 times this year, or you had to call 911 over and over again. Now you're a high utilizer. Now we'll have more resources because you are more vulnerable, or you're taking up more resources. So the chronically homeless individual is a person taking up the majority of the resources. It's not the people in the park. It's a one guy who's, again, been arrested 50 times, who's been to the hospital over and over and over again. Those take a lot of attention and need from other people. And sometimes we focus on those and not all these other folks who are just literally like fall in the cracks.
How much do you think an individual costs taxpayers to be on the street?
I forget the number, but I think it was, I don't know, don't quote me on this, anywhere from 55 to, for some folks, it's cheaper to house them and then for them to engage in services. So I don't know if that was like 55,000 a year or something like that, or it's more expensive to keep someone in prison versus it is to just house them and get them into services, because then they're not drawing down all these extra resources because they're in house. So we don't have the fire department, the police showing up. We're not putting you in the emergency room. You're not taking an $800 ambulance ride 3 times a month anymore, because now you're more stable. You're housed. You're no longer committing crimes. You're housed. You're no longer, having some of these negative encounters. And sure, they may still happen when you're housed. But the idea is, with that stability, now we can address these other needs and these other issues in sort of like the best case scenario.
It seems like there's maybe some barriers to successful placements due to maybe zoning ordinances. Is that something you can speak to?
I mean, I guess that's 2 things. So people in Boulder want to help, but not in my backyard. You gonna have the shelter over there? The hell you are? Nope. Let's organize. Let's get together, and people will get together, lickety split, to say it's not going to happen. So there was a unhoused teen shelter that was downtown that they said they don't want to build, and it was able to be built. Or the homeless day center, which was supposed to be downtown central area, people said no, we're not going to have it here. So it was forced to relocate at the all road shelter. So if you're if they're trying to build some new program, the citizens are going to say, we don't want this here. But also the citizens say, oh, we care for people. We want to give them the best. So again, one hand saying this, but the reality is they don't want to see this. They don't want it to, I won't say property values, but it's just not desirable, for some of these things. And so there's a lot of pushback on, I guess, sort of that zoning piece.
There's, I guess, a couple of things that I ran across was you can't have more than 3 people in a house that are unrelated.
They changed that law.
That you can now?
Yeah.
How many can you have?
I forget. Maybe it's 7.
7?
So they've changed that.
Okay. But you can't use a housing voucher in that scenario. Is that correct?
No, a housing voucher has a whole set of guidelines that HUD and things requires an inspection and all these things. So you just can't give your housing voucher to your grandma and say, hey, I'm going to live in the basement. It has to, there's a lot of policy and procedure that is attached to the housing voucher and those funds that people have to follow.
Is that ends up mostly being apartments then that people live in?
You can still find a private landlord that will do a house. And again, so it's mainly apartments, and the stock of apartments, they're full.
Yeah.
And so now you have people trying to go to Broomfield because now there's space in Broomfield, or I can't go to Longmont or Lafayette. And so if your housing voucher only covers $1,600 a month, good luck trying to find a place at $1,600 a month. And then again, if you're unhoused, you're going to be competing with me and you and everyone else. The person working at Starbucks, if someone sees an apartment for $1,200, the guy with the voucher is not going to see that. It's going to be posted on Craigslist. It's going to have 50 applications by noon. And this guy with the voucher, he's not even going to know if that apartment exists. So they say tight housing markets accentuate vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. So if you are vulnerable, you're not going to be able to compete in a tight housing market because you're competing with doctors and college students and everyone else for that $1,200 apartment. So back to having a case manager, having an advocate that say, okay, we'll go to these places, we'll fill out the applications, we'll do the $50 application fee, background checks, and really having an advocate is needed in these situations because even with a housing voucher, it creates more responsibilities, and that's scary too. Mm-hmm. What do you mean I have to go look at this place and I don't know where to go? I don't know where to look. And again, back to the multiple pillars of support, you need to be guided along that process. And so the voucher is not your golden ticket to success. So, maybe that's a myth. Oh, we just need a housing voucher. That's just the start of the journey for some folks.
Back in the day, we had the YMCA that people could go, get a room for $25 or whatever. And I heard some rumblings that they might bring back the single room occupancies.
When they had the youth hostel in Boulder, that was a wonderful thing. It's now a frat house. But there were rooms and you could share just like any hostel, right? Yeah. And so there was a place on the hill where people can go and they could work a minimum wage job or, some sort of temporary job and pay $500 a month just to get that place. Hotel rooms used to be part of that, but now they need a deposit of $100 and you need a credit card. And you could be so stressed by paying all this money to stay in a hotel room that you could afford an apartment with that money, but you don't have $2,500 for the deposit. You just have $1,000 to get you in that hotel room for a month. So the inability for people to save up some of their funds to put down a rental deposit is just back to that financial piece and that barrier. Most of these mortgages on some houses are less than $2,000 a month because they bought it in the 1980s or things like that. And you go out to rent an apartment and you'll get, 900 square feet, for that same $2,000. So the system is really designed to fail people. And instead of pointing our fingers at the system, we're pointing our fingers at the people and saying, well, that's his problem. It's his choice. And it's not the problem of the individual. It's a problem of society and how we've gotten to this point.
Well, Vic, you've said a lot. Anything else that you would want to have on record here that I haven't asked you?
the city of Boulder is being forced to reckon with this issue, and they really haven't figured out a way. So we haven't talked about the sweeps, right? And so if you're living on the street every week, someone's telling you to move along. And so we've created this real twisted game of almost cat and mouse. Okay, you told me to move here. I'm going to go over there. Now that I'm here, you're like, oh, I can't be here. So now you need to go over there. And so just imagine the stress if you had a...
That happens every week, correct?
It happens every week. They have a team called SAMS, Safe Outdoor Managed Spaces, that work in conjunction with many different entities of the city that say they identify the spots, they clean it up, they offer some resources, and then they just do it every week. So their budget right now for that is $3 million, and they're talking about increasing that. It includes park rangers, police officers, and like a literally cleanup crew to dispose of propane tanks, needles, and all the clutter that comes with someone living outside. And so there's a lot of resources just spent into pushing people around and cleaning it up versus more permanent solutions than again, this isn't prevention, right? These resources this is a reactionary thing. And so I believe if more time was spent in this prevention aspect, then maybe we wouldn't have to clean up all these camps. Or maybe when you got to town, someone could sit down to you and say, oh, you're new to town? Well, let me tell you, this is what you do. You've got that piece of paper. What does that mean? Where do I go? How do I get out of this situation? Maybe you can't because just go get a job. You're 21 or you're 72 and we need to get you into this program. And someone may not know about that because they're too sick. Right. And so we can also identify that as well. And again, sometimes we expect people to walk through the door. They don't even know what door to walk to.
Right.
Or this hasn't worked before. I don't trust that door. Or who's going to watch my stuff while I walk through that door? And so there's a lot of obstacles that are created. Another thing we didn't talk about is the way that Central Park basically keeps this whole system running. Because there's a lot of things happening in Central Park where I don't have to make these choices. If I stay here, everything I need will be brought to me. The drug dealers know to come to Central Park. The service providers know to come to Central Park. The police know to come to Central Park. The college kids dropping off free food, they know to come to Central Park to find people. There's Wi-Fi. There's bathrooms. There's a beautiful creek down there. It's close to the bus station. So some folks, they may stay there for a while and say, hey, I'm accustomed to this. This is not so bad. Some other folks say, I don't want to be near any of that stuff. There's too much drama. I'm going to go camp in other parts of town. So you do have different hotspots in Boulder, but Central Park is where harm reduction goes to pass out their supplies. And so if I can get all my needs met in this one area of town, why should I walk through that door?
Are you saying that we're enabling people to live this lifestyle by making it too easy?
I wouldn't say you're enabling people, but people have learned how to survive for themselves. So I look at people in a strength-based perspective. So if your strength is to manipulate the system, you have a great ability to assess where you're going to get your needs met, right? And so if we're teaching people this is where you go, then they're going to learn that because they learned that in Denver. They learned it in California. They learned it in New York, in Florida. I go to these places, I get the help. So some cities don't have a central hub. Sometimes you have to go here, you have to go there, you have to go there. So you don't have a car or a bicycle. You're kind of asked out. But if you learn, hey, I just got to this town. Where's the feed? Where do I get my clothes? Where is the drug dealer? Where's the library? Where can I get a blanket and a sleeping bag? You've learned that before you've gotten to Boulder, and so that's just going to continue. And so are we teaching this when they're 18 years old? Like as soon as you hit the streets, you get in the survival mode and you just stay in that. And again, it's harder to reach someone in survival mode if all they're worried about is food, shelter, clothing. It's going to be paramount for them, and everything else, even their own self-care, is not going to be important as where am I going to eat and where am I going to sleep.
So what do we do?
Again, you focus on the individual. Being able to navigate the system is part of that because all you learn to navigate is food. I know where to get the food. I know where to get socks. I know where to get my sleeping bag. I don't know how to get help. I don't know how to get into these programs. I don't know that you need this or that or the other, or I've had my ID for 5 years. So maybe I should start with my ID, but then I need a mailing address for that ID. So I haven't been able to get it sent, or I lost my ID. I can't go get this service. So, peer support comes in with some of that system navigation. You've been there, done that. I can direct people where to go. Also, with peer support, you're not trying to fix them or judge them. If you don't want to get sober today, okay, that's fine. But can we meet these other needs as well? Versus someone coming along, you must get into this program, you must take these meds, and they necessarily won't fit into that box. So system navigation is part of that. And moving away from almost a learned helplessness that, again, some cities, the shelter closes in the summertime because they think, okay, we don't need to help folks anymore. But what are we teaching them? That we just don't care about them because it's 75 degrees outside? We only care when it's, 15 degrees and there's 6 feet of snow. So people have received the message that no one gives two shits about them. And so it's harder to reach someone if they felt neglected for years and years and years.
So coming back, we need to somehow get more people around these folks, pull the community in a little bit more, figure out how to reach the individual. Because it doesn't seem like we have enough resources to run individualized plans for everybody.
You don't. And so in some ways, natural consequences need to happen as well. We just can't soften everything up. Like if you choose to sleep outside, you're going to get frostbite and you're going to lose some toes. And that sucks. You lost some toes, but are you happy like that? Haven't you learned? Or like, no, I'm okay. I'll lose the rest of them. And I've seen that happen. But I've also seen people say, I lost one toe and that, get me indoors, get me out of this place as soon as possible. Also, the natural consequences of, well, you can't urinate in the park. You can't stay on that bench with all your stuff. You can't shoplift. You can't steal. So we can't save people from themselves. And if we're scared to enforce some of these natural consequences, this learned helplessness, you've taught me I don't have to follow the rules. You taught me you're just going to give me a slap on the wrist and I can just do this over and over again versus, well, now you've really messed up and we're going to send you up the river. It's like, okay, no, I don't want to do that. No, I'm ready to go. Right. So natural consequences are also part of that because we don't want to be too parental, right? You're a human being. You need to make a choice. So you have a couple of choices today, but it's simply existing out here in this environment, that's a choice, but it's not going to continue in this manner because we have people over here who are willing to help you. Or if you're not willing to be helped, then maybe you should go back to Denver or Colorado Springs. So I wouldn't call it tough love, but there just needs to be no sugarcoating, in this. And so if you're giving out a sandwich, don't just give out the sandwich. Ask them about their food insecurity. Why are you coming out here for this sandwich? I've given you 15 sandwiches. Do you know how to eat? You expect me to feed you for the rest of your life? Or is there some other thing, some other skill you have, or some maybe something you don't know about? What strengths do you have? You made it here to get this sandwich. I bet you can walk across the street and do that. I bet you can go over there and do this other thing. You made it this far. Why can't you? Aren't you motivated to do something else? And so tapping into that person's motivation and in line with also these consequences, it's not the best situation, right? So they say, when you're sick and tired of something, you'll do something else. But if you're not sick and tired, and so I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and, I was able to make that choice. But I've also seen some people who aren't, they're not capable of doing that. And so, yes, in some situations, we should come in and help this person and see what they need. But there's a lot of people that fall somewhere in the middle. And, you're only accountable to yourself.
Do you think we have enough opportunities for individuals to pull themselves up? I mean, do we have work programs that people can, is there a way for people to make money without an ID, without all the stuff they need to get a job? Is that in place?
There's limited resources. So there's not enough programs for everyone. So sure, we can get a couple people in these programs and there's been great successes behind that. And we don't highlight those successes. We just highlight the people in the park. this person's doing this person's doing that. But we don't uplift the stories of people who are doing well, who've gotten out of these situations, whether it's, parole or community corrections or substance use or mental health issues. These programs, you go to their website, the Bridge House, they have success stories on there, and it's pages and pages. But you go to some of these other programs, I don't see success stories on the shelter's website or some of these other programs. So we need to highlight, to create hope that is possible, having these healthy role models of success. And then with peer support, that does sometimes create jobs for people like myself or others who say, hey, I was in the fire. Now I'm out of it. I'm helping other people who are still in that situation. So that can be a pathway. And again, if there's community members or getting other people involved, maybe there's opportunities that, haven't been created yet, or there's not the opportunity. But again, some of these basic needs, you can't apply for a job. So if you put 4839 Broadway on your job application, and I've heard this, they just go straight to the trash. We know where that's at.
And that's a shelter.
That's a shelter.
Yeah.
Or you put 2200 Canyon Boulevard, that's a halfway house. Just going straight to the trash, right? And then again, in this town, I'm competing with college kids, the Europa kids, who are just like a great disposable resources for a lot of employers. Hey, they show up, they look great, and I'll give those guys a shot. The guy in the park, no, we're good on that. Let me just, get some CU kids. So again, there's a competition for the limited resources, right? Back to that housing analogy. And there are opportunities, but they are also limited as well. And so there's always going to be people who can't benefit from those. And that's also part of not sugarcoating. Like, on some days we'll talk about the good old days of 2025 when there was only 100 people in the park. 5 years from now, we have 200, and we're like, oh my gosh, what's happened, right? So in some ways, like, these are the good old days, because it's going to get worse. Yeah. It's going to get worse.
What's the message that you would have for an individual in the park right now? What would you say to them?
I would just say that hope is possible, and don't give up on yourself.
Well, thank you, Vic.
Okay.
All right. We're done.
Okay. I thought the guy at the kite was going to crash into your